We're hearing news every day that changes that has an effect on what that is. The State Department is constantly releasing updates. The cruise line is changing things with the CDC. So I do my best to stay on top of that to help people. So we just have to stay positive because that's the only thing we can do until we know for sure what the situation is. Some people have asked, how's the pandemic affecting travel costs? Because I don't think people realize that travel costs aren't going to go down. Some people think it's going to be really cheap, and I don't think it is, because I think availability and capacity are going to be controlled until they know. Ultimately, it's important to you to approach it the way you need to and work with a good travel advisor and plan ahead and be smart. That's the most important thing I can always say, is to plan ahead. And that's what we're going to talk about today too, the advantages of that. I will say that the value of using a travel advisor has become more evident in the last 4 or 5 months, because a lot of people do travel on their own, but a lot of people got stuck out in the cold, didn't know how to get things resolved when all this just kind of blew up. And I was there to give them guidance, to hold their hand, to resolve problems. That's what I do anyway, but this pandemic had made it even more prevalent to do that. I brought them solutions and alternatives, whether it was just saying, you know what, let's wait, or let's book for next year. And then I also brought them huge amounts of value. I had one client who had paid $5,400 on their cruise, got canceled, and the cruise line matched that dollar for dollar. They got $5,400 in addition to what they already paid, and were able to completely pay off their cruise for next year. That was through help of a travel advisor like myself. I've gotten extras for people with making sure that their travel insurance through a third party got transferred to a new trip. And I've had incredible amounts of time savings. That's something I pride myself on. I had one client who had an issue with a travel company. I did 3 phone calls that totaled 370 minutes. That's not a typo. Over 6 hours, I was on hold on 3 different calls to resolve an issue for somebody. I was doing other things and multitasking, I'm not gonna lie, but I was there to help them to make it easier for them. So just keep that all in perspective. And as I move forward with what I'm gonna teach you and help you learn today, that a lot of these things are what we're used to in that, like, when we can just travel, but I want us to stay positive, to know that we will do these things again. So I figure that's the best way to approach it. So what is travel? What does it mean? Travel is something different to everybody. It can be watching the glaciers calve in Alaska, making great memories with your grandkids or your kids, let's say on a Disney cruise. Maybe it's going on an educational trip to learn about history in the US or somewhere around the world. Maybe you wanted to take a cooking class in Italy. I've taken a mosaic art class in Italy because I just love that. There are different ways you can enhance your life through that. How about the national parks? It's one of my favorite things. There's a lot of natural beauty in the US and around the world. That's what some people focus their travel on. Or many of you just like to hold a drink in your hand with toes in the sand and relax and do nothing. Travel is what it is to you. And that's what I always tell people. What's important to you? The number one thing I think that we can do, that I tell people and teach them, is plan ahead, because there's so much to learn about booking seasons, high demand seasons, especially if you have kids or considerations with school breaks, holidays. Once you learn those things, you can be better prepared and not be disappointed. And that's where my role comes in to help you. The availability puzzle is something that people go, what does that mean? Well, itineraries and trips and hotels do sell out. You know, you have to understand that, and that ties to hot spots and places where people like to travel at different times of the year. If you like big ship cruising or river ship cruising, they're 2 completely different things. River ships only hold about 150 people, where big ships hold 3,000 to 4,000. So when you have somebody that knows it's better to plan ahead, you're not going to be disappointed by not getting the space or the type of cabin you want. And the other thing I talk about people with availability is cabin math, because not every cabin can hold 4 people. So 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. It might be no, you got to get a different cabin, and there may not be availability. That's where, again, planning ahead is a key thing when it comes to any type of travel you do. I also believe that travel is an opportunity to save, budget, and pay, because I give that service to my clients. I allow them to pay as they go because they want to spread out that cost. And it allows you to live your vacation or think about it for a longer period of time. Right now, we're being forced to do that, which necessarily is frustrating, but it's not a bad thing. But sometimes you have that crazy day at work and you're like, oh, I can't wait to go on that trip, even if it's 12 months down the road. That's so much fun about planning ahead, and that's a big benefit of it. So a lot of travel and approach to travel comes to what is value, because everybody approaches value differently. It's really the monetary worth, the market price. We understand that. It's a fair return on what those goods or services are for something you pay. We all understand what we think value is, but you have to look at that relative value or worth to you. Is it a good value for a balcony stateroom? Is there a better value in booking a nonstop flight because you don't like the fly, but you know you have to go somewhere? Is there the value of working with an experienced professional like myself? It's what's important to you, and you always have to remember that, and that's what I always strive to help people remember when I'm working with them. This picture is a prime example. There's some memories being made with the family, sitting quietly or together on their balcony. That's something they valued and wanted to do, so they'd be willing to take that into consideration when they're looking at options or prices and things of that nature. So a lot of times people don't understand there's all alternatives and there's different things you can do when you're approaching all types of travel. And the biggest thing I can talk about in that way, sometimes it can work to your advantage, is being flexible. Because sometimes shifting your trip a week either direction can save you money because of demand, or we don't know if there's a whole big group that's on a cruise or going on a tour that's sold out. You might shift it and be able to find that there's different money-saving opportunities or different values you can get if you just have a little flexibility. Maybe you can travel off season if you're allowed. Maybe springtime to go to the national parks, or maybe the fall to do something in Europe versus the higher seasons. And you should always be open to suggestions. I'm always offering ideas to my clients to help them understand that, you know, maybe you take a cruise from southbound, meaning be northbound from, let's say, Vancouver up to Alaska versus the other direction, because it's always cheaper that direction. I'm not sure why, but I think most people like to start in Alaska and work their way down. But if you don't have a preference to that, it's an opportunity to be open to a suggestion and then save some money. There's always supplier opportunities. That's something I'm going to talk about with my relationship with cruise planners, with promotions and status match that can give you more value. And it's important to understand alternatives if you have unique personal situations. Let's say you're a solo traveler, or let's say you have family that you have to consider. You have to understand that there may be other costs involved, like single supplements, and there may be opportunities. There's always times when that single supplement might be reduced, particularly with cruises and sometimes on tours. School breaks, again, goes back to considering the booking seasons. If you have family considerations in schools or kids in school or college, or you're a teacher, that's stuff you have to plan ahead and understand that you have to consider that. The other thing that I think is funny that always kind of makes me laugh is the 12-year-old adult, because most of these companies think kids are an adult and they charge the full fare. So you have to consider that, even if you have younger kids, about how you can maybe maximize that if they're younger than that age, if they're buying admission tickets, things like that. And the biggest alternative that can work to your advantage is make it a group. What do I mean by that? If you have a family that wants to go on a cruise or sometimes a tour, when you have so many people that work together, I can work with you to help get group rates with as few as 6 people. I can work with the tour operators and the cruise operators to try and get a certain number of cabins that give you prices that are locked in. And that's a good alternative to consider. People don't understand that. And I tell them, if you have family, friends, and you want to do something, let's talk it out. Let's figure out if a group will work for you, because that's a great way to save some money and have more value. When I travel personally, I think it's important to maximize resources. We all want to get the best bang for our buck, for our time and our money. And also convenience, which is highly valuable, especially these days because we're all so busy. And that can come in many different ways. I like to talk about maximizing flights because that's, for many people, when we're able to fly and when we're comfortable to fly, that's where we spend a lot of our time and money, is in the flight. So if you take one flight, I call it one flight, many nights. Maybe you extend your trip a couple days from a 7-day trip to a 10-day trip, have more time in Europe or another part of the United States, and you're going to be able to maximize that time and only have to pay once on your flight. And I also always tell people, go far first. So what do I mean by that is if you're going to Europe or going eastbound, go as far as you can, because that way you can acclimate, get settled, and then work your way back so your return flights are easier. And it works the same way the other way. If you're going to Alaska, go all the way up. Or if you need to go, let's say, Asia, same thing. Go as far as you can and work your way back. It just helps you acclimate and enjoy the whole entire trip a little easier. Another thing with resources is understanding, and this is where I can help out as much as possible, is airline fees, rules, the luggage issues, because there's so many rules and they all vary by the different tour operators and airlines. You know, you have to pay some things a la carte these days. They advertise the cheapest price to get you on the plane, then you have to pay for your baggage, your seats, your pre-boarding. But you can also use loyalty points. You can use a credit card. Maybe it's cheaper to buy the Delta credit card and have the amenities for that year if you're doing a couple big trips. There's a lot of different ways that you can maximize those resources. And then if you're comfortable, you have to look at whether you want to carry on or have a personal bag or checked bag, because they're all defined differently and they all usually add up to some cost. I personally am a light packer. It drives people I travel with crazy, but I don't mind doing that. I can do laundry on vacation. I've done it. I've done laundry in Japan. I've done laundry in the national parks because it gives me a couple hours of downtime and it just helps me recapture myself for the day, maybe plan the next day, and then I still only have that one bag. But again, these are different ways you can maximize your resources. And every time I have a conversation with people, I learn their travel style. I learn what they like or don't like to make the suggestions that make the most sense. You can also maximize your resources with time. Time, again, I really believe is our biggest commodity. So some people are willing to put a little more money out and understand flight connections using TSA PreCheck or Global Entry, which have a cost to them, but I think give incredible return. You may pay more to stay in a city center hotel. What do I mean by that? So you can stay downtown in London or downtown in Chicago, or you might stay 20 minutes outside and have to get on a train to go back and forth. Or you might want to stay by the beach, like where I am in the Outer Banks or in a resort in the Caribbean, or you stay a little further out and take a taxi ride. So you might pay a little less to stay out, but you have that time savings, if you look at that, of convenience. And then there's always the idea of private transfers and tours that I like to educate people on, because they sometimes do cost more, or they actually do, but you have that private kind of connection for that one day. Maybe you want to see some hometown where your family came from somewhere in Europe, or you want a private guide in one of the national parks or in a city. Why not pay that little bit and have that luxury of having somebody help you? You deserve that, to have your time, and it's really time and money well spent. Another way of maximizing resources is through dollar savings. It's hard dollar savings that you can realize through different creative ways to travel that I always advise and suggest to people if they're open to it. Back-to-back trips, tour operators sometimes will do that. Back-to-back, you do one 7-day trip and another 7-day trip, and they'll give you a discount on the trips. Cruise and tour combos are very, very popular, very, very common, particularly in Alaska. Most people do a cruise and some tour port or land tour. It's a great way, again, to maximize airfare and spending that time, because you're acclimating your body, and then you're seeing both the land aspect and the cruise aspect. That's also very popular in Europe with the Mediterranean. People add on pre and post and on river cruises. Reposition yourself. What does that mean? Reposition yourself is because ships move all around. When ships are sailing in normal times, they're traveling from Alaska to the Caribbean or Caribbean to Europe. Well, those ships have to go from A to B and B to C, and you can do a repositioning cruise from Fort Lauderdale to Europe, let's say England in April, and have a really great rate on that compared to another time of the year. You might spend a lot of time at sea, but it's giving you time to relax and maybe just kick back at a cost that's very, very different. Again, it's about being realistic. It's your vacation and it's what's important to you. You don't want to disappoint yourself. You want to make sure your expectations are met. And as always, if it's important to you, then it's important. So you have to keep that in mind. Again, it's what's important to you. I keep saying that, and that's how I work with people and tell people that any of these things I'm teaching you, if it doesn't pertain to you, you think, no, I could never do that, that's okay, because it's your vacation and it's what's important to you. So why use a travel advisor? Why use Captain Carmen? Well, travel is my passion, like Sharon mentioned. I love to travel. I love visiting new places, and I really love the fact that I can work in the industry. I love helping others experience travel dreams. It's what I do best. I love sharing my insight and helping them make that a reality, no matter what that dream is. I have my extensive travel experience, and I bring a high level of customer service that's focused on finding the best value to the people in place. And that customer service is based on the fact that I feel I'm a steward of people's time, their money, and their resources because I'm working on their behalf. And again, I have my industry experience. I'm also state licensed and insured through the Department of, I think it's Land and Fruit. I forget which one it is, unique licensing, and also with cruise planners. And there's never a fee to use my services. Much like folks who work in real estate and whatnot, they're compensated through those cruise and tour companies. That's the way I am. So I'm here to help you. If you're not using a travel advisor, you should consider it because somebody's there on your side, and I'd love to do that. So why am I with Cruise Planners? Cruise Planners has over 25 years experience in the industry with over 700 franchise owners and 4,000 associates. They don't just do cruises, we do land and tours. That's a big thing that people get confused about. But we do all types of travel. We have exceptional value through our leverage buying power. That's what I was talking about before. So when you're working with us, we can get the best rates on group cruises and on other tours, things that you don't find anywhere. We've vetted our suppliers. We're doing that even now in light of the pandemic because there's been some issues, so that we're offering opportunities with the best people. That's another advantage of working with somebody who has an association with such a strong organization. And I have the support of home office, the franchisees, and other people in the industry who have like minds like me. We're part of the American Express Travel Network and associated with all these great associations that give backing to what we bring to the table. And I'm proud to be a part of that group. So let's learn about some travel terminology. Just like any industry and business, there's a lot of different things that are out there. So I'm going to help clear some of that up or explain some that you may not have heard before. A guaranteed departure. It sounds what it is. It's pretty straightforward. I never put people on a tour that's not a guaranteed departure because you don't want to invest that time and money and have them pull the plug maybe 6 weeks before. It does happen, and some people will roll that dice because the price might be a little different, but I don't think it's the best move personally. A guaranteed departure is one that definitely goes. What's an escorted tour versus a hosted tour? So if you're doing an escorted tour of Europe, you have somebody who's with you, a guide and a driver that's taking you to all the places. Your hotels are thought out. You have certain meals and activities. Hosted might be just going to a city. Let's say you go to Chicago and you have a local host, or you go to London. That's someone, and you might meet Diane at a desk who can give you advice. That's a difference between escorted or hosted. When you look at these two top pictures, the bus against the hotel is actually a tour I was on. That's a bus in Ireland that pulled literally that close to the hotel. That was an escorted tour. The guide that was there took our bags, all good to go. That's an example of an escorted tour. The picture next to it is friends and I on an independent hosted tour. We were in London, walking to the train station, carrying our own bags. That's the way we did it. It was no problem. That just shows you the difference. So if you're up for that, you want a little more independence and some adventure, you can do a hosted or an independent tour versus a escorted. So that's the two differences. So I talk about all-inclusive. I know a lot of people have been to different all-inclusive resorts, but I always say, or is it? Because I like people to understand and learn about the fine print, because not every all-inclusive resort may include all the things you want to do. Sure, there'll be meals and some types of drinks, maybe some activities, but it may not include all the restaurants you want. It might not include top shelf liquor. It may not include motorized water sports. It may not include certain other amenities that could be in the resort. So when people ask me about booking all-inclusive, I always make sure I look at the fine print and make sure they understand what's included or what's not, because that's really important. And talk about airfare. You have direct or nonstop. I like to bring this up because some people might say, I have a direct flight to Los Angeles, not realizing it stops in Las Vegas. For some people, that might not be a bad thing, but it's a direct stop, a direct flight. You might stop for a little bit. You don't change your plane, but it keeps going. But if you want that nonstop flight that's going to save you time, then that's the difference there. A big thing that I like to talk about with cruises, even though they're not going right now, is the difference between a cruise fare and a cabin fare. Because some people may be thinking they're getting the best price because some liquidator or low budget cruise seller may be talking about a cabin fare, which is not the price that you pay. You pay the cruise fare. The cabin fare is part of the cruise fare. There's always additional taxes, fees, port fees that are included in that. So I always make sure that people understand all the things that are included so they understand the true cruise fare versus the cabin fare. That's something to really be aware of if you're looking at cruising. Guaranteed cabin versus pre-selected cabin. What's the difference? Well, a guaranteed cabin is for a certain category. So most cruises have inside cabins, ocean view, which has a window, or a balcony. They're the three main cabin categories on a cruise. If you book a guaranteed balcony, that means they'll put you anywhere in that ship in a balcony. It may not be the exact place you want, but they guarantee that you will be in that category. It's usually the cheapest way to get into that category on that ship, so you just have to be aware of it. A pre-selected cabin is if Steve wants to be on deck 7 in the midship on the side, that's where he loves to be, then you have to do a pre-selected cabin. That's how it works with that. And if you're traveling with other people and you want to be in the cabins side by side, then you can't do guaranteed because they could put you in different places. The pre-selected will put you side by side because you pre-selected that before you go. Another thing about cruising is understanding the difference between tender ports and dock ports. And the reason I bring that up is because that affects sometimes the time. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a consideration to understand it. So a tender port is like that picture at the bottom from Sitka, Alaska, where that small boat takes you from the bigger boat to the dock because it's the port is too shallow or there's other conditions why the ship can't go all the way in, as opposed to the picture on the right where you can just walk off. So it's good to understand that. For people who travel internationally and want to do that, it's understanding the difference between star levels, because a 4-star hotel in the US is not the same. It's going to be, I should say a 4-star hotel in Europe is going to be a different type of hotel here. It's more like a 3-star. So it's understanding that expectation because the hotel levels and classifications are different in Europe than they are here. It doesn't mean that they're bad, it's just they're different. So it's understanding how they're categorized. And then, of course, there's terminology around the differences in the requirements with passports, passport cards, and visas. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So when it comes to travel identification, I hands down believe that a passport is always the best recommendation for any type of travel. In some instances, it's required, particularly if you're going international on some types of cruises. I think everybody should have a passport just because in today's day and age, it's the best type of identification to have. And I highly recommend that if you don't. Because there are opportunities to use birth certificates to go on certain types of cruises, but you have to make sure you know the difference between a certified birth certificate, which comes from the state you were born, versus a hospital one, which has your baby feet on it, because people get that confused. And I've heard of stories of people getting turned away for getting on cruises and such because they didn't have the right requirements when it came to that. And I always work with clients to make sure they understand all those requirements, particularly if you're dealing with kids under certain ages and stuff like that. You know, I can always help with that. There's also considerations about the difference between a passport and a passport card. A passport card can be used to cross borders between the US and Canada and Mexico, but it really can't get you on the other cruises or international travel and things like that. I don't honestly feel there's any value in any passport card. I tell people just to use the passport. Get a passport, it's the best, safest way. And then when you're traveling, particularly international and on cruises, it's important to understand that even though your passport may be valid till June and you're going on a cruise in May, your passport needs to be valid for 6 months after you finish travel. A lot of people don't realize that. So it's always good to be aware of that and to be planning ahead so that you have all that documentation in place. And I always make sure people look at it way far in advance so they have time to renew. And then, of course, if you're doing international travel, there's requirements for visas. That varies by countries. The most common are Russia and China. And then I always work with clients on how they have to do that because they have to usually order that themselves. There's costs involved. And a lot of that is the responsibility of the traveler to understand it. But we always check that if there's international spots that you're going, particularly in international cruising. Quickly, I want to touch on the different ways that people can get confused or need to be educated about what type of documents. A lot of people cruise from Florida on what we call closed loop cruises. They leave out of a port in the United States, out of Florida. They touch one international place like the Bahamas and they come back. You can use a birth certificate and a government issued license there, but you have to make sure that it's a certified birth certificate. All the names must match. So if somebody's been married, divorced, remarried, there has to be the documentation that connects the dots with a marriage license or something like that. If you're traveling with younger kids, you have to make sure you have all the proper documentation. Let's say if you're sharing custody, you have to have the proper documentation that says, yes, I can have the authority to be the guardian for this person while I'm away. That's big with grandparents. If you're taking kids, it's important to know that. Some of the islands now do require passports, particularly Martinique and Guadeloupe. So if you're going there, even if you're flying there, a passport is required. Alaska cruises, I recommend a passport for all Alaska cruises, but if you're doing round trip from Seattle, it's like a closed loop. You can do the passport and your, you can do your government ID and your birth certificate. But again, I think the passports are the best way to go, particularly because all Seattle cruises usually go into the Yukon to where the Skagway, which is right on the Canadian border. I talked about minors, especially with the parents and divorced grandparents. That's real important. And another thing a lot of people aren't aware of is if you know people or happen to be traveling with people who unfortunately may have a DUI on their record from whenever, that Canada is very, very strict on people who have a DUI on their record, even if it's years ago, decades ago. That people I know have been turned away on Canadian cruises from Alaska because they weren't allowed into the country. And this URL for Canada DUI entry law explains everything that people need to know about how they can or can't travel to Canada if they do have a DUI on their record. So just some visual examples when it comes to travel identification. The top picture on your is the birth certificate. That's a certified one. The baby feet one doesn't work. The passport is a standard passport that I think a lot of you probably have seen or have. Not that the passport card gets a thumb down because it's bad. I just don't think it's the best thing for traveling if you're considering international travel. And then these are just some examples of some visas that would be attached to your passports when you're traveling and when and where that's required. So I wanted to mention about Real ID. We heard that for a while about Real ID because it was going to be required to travel for US travel. If you're traveling domestically on an airline. That was supposed to happen 10/1 of 2020. That has been pushed back for a year. The easiest way to know if you're Real ID ready is you just pull out your driver's license. You look for this little gold star. If you have it, then you have a Real ID. You're fine. The newer one also has the hologram picture, which is the second image at the bottom of the little face. If you don't have either of these, you should consider reaching out to the DMV, getting the new driver's license and taking the step to have it done. You make an appointment. It's really simple to do, and then you're good to go. And again, I highly recommend it. It doesn't really cost any more if you're coming up for renewal, and we do have another year and change now because of the fact that it's been pushed back. But you will be required to use this to travel domestically starting 10/1/21. Now, if you don't have it and you have a passport, then that's okay. But this is another just easy way to do it, so I wanted to mention that. I like to talk about a unique thing is I tell people when I try to help them learn the difference between visiting a destination when you travel or experience a destination. You know, you want to think outside the box, get to know the locals, maybe see museums at night so you can maximize your time during the day. Spending more hotel nights in a place because that can actually cost less. That's a unique trick I tell people about. You know, you spend 5 nights and get a 4th night free, and then maybe you can shorten the last day, but then you're reducing your costs, maybe seeing more of a city, like if you're staying in Paris or something like that. You might want to talk about being smart about food because people talk about it's so expensive when we travel, and food is a big part about it, especially if you're doing it independently or having to buy meals. You might want to find a local place. Avoid tourist menus, especially in Europe, because they can be very, very expensive. Don't be afraid to ask a local where there's a place to go. And that's where I bring up about learning some basic language. I really think that's fun. I think it helps you experience your trip before you go. And then on top of that, you can try to use the locals to help them help you out. Because just like we do when people come to visit where we live, people want to help you out for the most part. They really do. Another trick I tell people about when they want to experience a city is try and stay close to the trains or the metros that are going to get you around. It leaves you less time to have to travel and more time to experience the city. You know, you can use the metros and the local transportation. Don't be afraid to use local tour guides, taxis, Ubers. I used Ubers last year when I was in Prague, and I was paying $3 and $4 to get around the city from place to place, and it was convenient and easy. And most of these places, they speak English, if not all. So think out of the box and turn your visit into more of an experience. So I get asked a lot now, where can we travel? Where can we go? There's a lot going on. The pandemic has hit us hard, and people are just getting antsy. They just want to go places. So the first slide that I'm going to show is really what I think a lot of people are doing as an alternative. I'm an example of that right now. And then the other stuff are just places that I think are great places that bring value that we can travel when it's kind of more normal circumstances. But I just wanted to touch it because I think it's important. So remember, it's always what's important to you. If you're not comfortable going to a hotel, not comfortable going to Disney, even though it's open right now, don't want to get on a plane, then that's what's important to you. Don't ever forget that. So right now, I think drive vacations are where most people are kind of investing their time. A couple days at the beach, maybe going up to the mountains, which is convenient for us, North Georgia, maybe to Tennessee, going to the beach in the Carolinas where I am with my family, which kind of came together because different trips got canceled. So we said, hey, let's make something happen. Like I mentioned, Disney open. I was there recently. Felt safer there than some of the other places, whether it's Walmart or Publix. But that might not be for somebody. But that does give you an option. Or you can just find a resort and go poolside. You can find these places. These are the best options, I think, for people right now. I can help you with all different ideas, and it allows people to still get away, even for a couple nights, because we're struggling to recharge. We're struggling to regroup until we can do it. And travel is important. It's something I think that we have to make part of our lives. It helps maintain us. And right now, these are some good options. But when things get back to, I don't think the new normal, that phrase we hear, or when we can go, here's some places I think that give great value. I talk about beaches by land. We live where there's great beaches. We know that. But let's not forget some places like Aruba and parts of Mexico, Cabo, Cozumel. Your dollar can really go far there. They're great places, some great all-inclusive stays that give you a little more value than some of the other resorts in some of the other Caribbean islands, which are beautiful, but just keep in mind they might cost more. I bring up Aruba because it's kind of out of the hurricane belt. It can be arid with the dry side, that's the deserty part, and there's a lot of great restaurants. If you like eating out, when you're comfortable going there when you can, there's great places in Aruba that people love to go to and experience. Don't forget the United States. We live in a beautiful, wonderful country. Some of the places that I'd love to talk to people about: Page, Arizona; Savannah, Georgia; Portland, Oregon. Page, Arizona, I think, is this wonderful little town that's not far from Lake Powell. You can get to southern Utah. You can get to the Grand Canyon. You can get to the slot canyons like Antelope Canyon, which is this picture that I took. It's beautiful. It's a great place to center yourself out of with beautiful scenery. And there's so many other places like that in the United States that offer that. Savannah, Georgia, a quick, 5 or 6 hour drive away from most of us. You can go there, see great history. You can see the waterfront. There's the spooky history if you like that. It's just something to consider. And these places are less expensive than some of the other big places that people go to. That's why I like to talk about Portland. Portland gives you a great place in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. It's a lot less expensive than Seattle, which is a beautiful city, but Portland's got a little more cost effectiveness to it, in my opinion. And it gives you great access to Astoria on the West Coast, the beautiful Oregon coast, and the Willamette Valley, which is, if you like waterfalls and you want to see some beautiful greenery, it's great places to go. Independent drives, and don't forget our national parks. I love our national parks, and they're great places and great ways to give value. River cruising. How can river cruise be a value? Isn't it expensive? I think you get an incredible amount of higher end value and inclusive, intimate service on a river cruise in Europe than you do anywhere. There's only about 150 people. I think they're only going with 100 nowadays when they start sailing again. They know your name, they know your likes and dislikes so instantly, and it gives you a lot of time back. So when you're on a river cruise, you see how close it is to the river's edge. That's how close you dock. When you get off the river boat, you're off in literally 2 minutes or a minute. Everything is so much quicker, and I mean that in a good way. You get so much more time back to enjoy the experience, to really relax on a higher end value. That's why I talk about this from a value perspective. London, Paris, Rome, everybody loves those cities. I've been to all of them. They're wonderful places. Don't forget Central Europe if you're looking for value. If you're looking for great places to see beautiful architecture that wasn't bombed in the wars, has a lot of great culture, people who speak English wonderfully. Don't forget Prague, places in Hungary and Budapest, Poland and beyond. Central Europe is really wonderful, and it's getting more and more acclimated to people traveling there. Again, they're coming back since it's been the effects of the pandemic, but it will return, and it's a great consideration, especially if you're going back and forth on a river cruise. It's a great way to do it. That's how I did it, and I absolutely loved it. Again, it's great value and beautiful, beautiful places to see. And I talk again about cruises. Cruising getting a bad name right now because of everything going on. But when you look at the value cruises give you from end to end, you unpack once, all your meals are included, you get to go to multiple destinations. When you're comfortable, when everything's good to go and how you want to do that, cruising will be returning for sure. And it's a great value, especially like I talked about with groups, you'll be able to do that. The Caribbean gives us many options, but Alaska, Hawaii, and beyond, great options, including Europe. So planning ahead is even more important. Right now, everything looks like this puzzle, all scattered. I want everybody to be kind of put together, ready to go. Think about it. Let's have a call. Let's talk about it. It gives you a little time to get excited, even though it might be 6, 12 months away. That's okay. And why is that okay? Because when you do that, you practice vacationance. It's a new word I'm teaching you about. Vacation is vacation maintenance. It's staying positive that we're going to travel again. It is the act of staying positive, knowing that we have something on the books, it's being supported. My family has a trip planned for summer 21. We stay excited. We talk daily about it with vacations. We're staying excited. It's having people and things that support your vacation dreams. I'm so glad I'm working with Captain Carmen. He provides vacations. He helps me out. He keeps me informed about my vacation that's going to become a reality. And there's a thing I like about the upkeep of property and knowledge. It's, you know, thinking about that camera you want to buy or that new bathing suit for your trip. You know, that new piece of luggage and the Italy guidebook are exactly what Sharon needed when she purchased it to practice vacation. It's staying positive and it reminds her of your trip next year. We hope it's going to happen. We have to stay positive and keep thinking about it. That's super important. So when you're ready to learn more about travel, reach out to the captain. Let's apply some vacations to your travel dreams. I'm here to help, and I hope you learned some part about that. It's important. And the one thing I want to close with is let's talk about Captain Carmen's Vacation Dine Around. That's how I've been actively trying to practice vacations with people. I have some great travel swag to give to the first 3 people who go to my channel, like some of my stuff. If you leave a comment, the first 3 people who comment, I'm going to give you some great travel tchotchkes to go with that. Go search Captain Carmen Travel on YouTube. I have 8 videos I've posted. I'm helping small business with different restaurants that remind me of places that we want to travel. I have a couple more in the can ready to go. Check it out. Subscribe, comment, and win. I appreciate that very much. And with that, I say thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sharon and Kaba. And if you have any questions, I hope I didn't talk too much for everybody.
No, that was awesome, Carmen. That was amazing. That was a lot of information. It was very helpful.
There's a lot of detail, and that's what I'm here to do, to help out people and staying positive for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Carmen, I was very impressed with your presentation. I mean, you did something in 30 minutes that would probably take a lifetime to do. That, and then, and I saw everything that you take care of everything. That being said, if you have your bags packed, are there situations where you can, go at the last minute?
Well, I would say that in certain situations when the travel industry is normal, there are opportunities, and if people have that flexibility, if they're retiree or their job can take them with them, that's something definitely that we can always be discussed. Right now, I think it's a little more of a challenge because of the situation around it, but that's always a consideration if you're open to that. You may have to settle for certain opportunities or availabilities, but that's always something that's definitely out there for sure, Jeff.
Okay.
And I talk a lot. I have to be careful because my sister's on the line, so she can attest to it. So I wanted to make sure I got everything in.
I followed you, and it was perfect.
So.
Hey, Carmen, I have a question for you.
Yeah, Jen, what's up?
So I was kind of spoiled in the sense when I did international mission trips, like when I worked at Ohio State, they had like a international travel center where you'd go in and they would tell you what vaccines you needed based on, what region, and they would help you with that. Well, I don't have that luxury anymore. And as you know, we're planning to go to South Africa next year. And I'm assuming that there's probably some vaccines involved with that travel. Absolutely. So what's your recommendation on that? Do you just go to your regular doctor? Is there a center here like in Tampa that people go to that keep up on the different waves of things? So
that's a great question. And I would approach that 2 ways, Jennifer. I have some friends who hiked Kilimanjaro 2 years ago, and it's important to know not only where you're going. It's important to know where you're going in Africa, which countries you're going to, because the requirements may be different. And then I would talk to your primary care physician first, but once you know what you have to get, it's important to know that those vaccines may not be readily available because they're so unique. You probably have to foot that cost yourself. Your insurance will probably not cover that. And sometimes, even if you go to, let's say, your doctor and he can get it, there could be a lag 3-6 weeks prior to you needing that. And you have to make sure that you're getting that vaccination with enough time prior to your departure so it's acclimated in your system. So there's a couple facets to that, particularly with African countries. So if you're going, let's say next June, I'll just use that date, it wouldn't hurt to start investigating that now, to just get a timeline in place, especially in light of everything going on, but just to be prepared. And I can help you with some resources for that if you need to. We can talk offline for sure.
Okay, great.
Hey, Captain.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah, Steve, what's up?
First of all, I want to say I did book a cruise with the captain March the 13th. We were supposed to go. And then March the 14th at 12 and midnight, I got a call from Carnival Cruise Line. They canceled the cruise because of the coronavirus. So we were really bummed out, man, but we were ready to go.
Steve's wife wasn't happy when we talked on Sunday, but it's what it was.
It is what it is, but we'll get back to another one. Okay,
Thank
my
you.
question
Appreciate it.
is, you said something about one way or another, other way or another one. I didn't catch it. It said Vancouver to Alaska or Alaska to Vancouver. Which one is best?
Well, most people, if you're going to go Alaska cruise, I highly recommend doing a land portion with that, because the land experience in Alaska is very different than the cruise experience, because you see different types of the state of Alaska.
Okay.
So I always recommend people to do a 4 or 5 day land tour. That's where I was supposed to be now, to be honest with you, and that got canceled. You do a land tour first, and then you get on in Anchorage, it's really Whittier, which is about 60 miles. You take the train down to Whittier, and then you cruise southbound, because you're on a land tour. It moves at a different type of pace. Then you get on the cruise, and you can relax. You can take it. Now, they have to bring that ship from Vancouver back to Whittier, north.
Okay.
So some people who just want to do that can do that. Some people do that and just want to go that way. And most of the time, anything northbound tends to be a little less in price, because of the fact that more people want to do the southbound.
So Vancouver to Alaska is cheaper. Is that what you're saying?
It would be cheaper. You're not going to see anything different.
Okay.
But you have to remember, once you get to north to Alaska, you got to fly all the way back. So some people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a preference.
One day. And the second question I had is, you talked about repositioning cruises are reasonably priced. Is there anywhere they publicize repositioning cruises?
Repositioning cruises are usually listed with cruise suppliers as transatlantic, or that's the main place, because they usually go from somewhere on the East Coast to somewhere in Europe. Yeah. And they're usually only going to Europe in around April and back in October.
Okay.
Now, the repositioning cruises go from Fort Lauderdale through the Panama Canal, but they're maximizing the Panama Canal, so they're not as much as a cost savings. But some of those cruises that go from Fort Lauderdale to, let's say, London might spend 7 days on the Atlantic Ocean. So some people want nothing to do with that. Other people love the sea days, but they can be very, very reasonable. I have access to that pricing and that availability, no problem, if anyone ever wants to look at that.
I was in the Coast Guard. I have 5 years, 7 months sea time. So I know the sea, and I love it out there, me personally. I just wanted to say that the travel advisor, there was outstanding information that I didn't even think of. So thanks for the
absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Awesome. I had some friends that went on, Carmen, they went on a some type of a cruise in the Greek Isles. Now, I've talked because I have such major stomach issues. Right. I'm not a sea person for that reason, but they went on this cruise where they would go to an island and spend the day, and then they'd have dinner, and then they'd get back on a ship and go overnight to another island. Right. And they were on the ship that long. So I'd be really interested to look at something like that.
Yeah, there's definitely opportunities with that stuff. And the other thing I tell a lot of people too is if you're, because some people just aren't big ship people, and that's fine. My recent experience last year on a river cruise is an incredible alternative for people who are leery about being on big ship waters. And that river cruise doesn't just mean the Danube and stuff in Europe. You can also go to American river cruising, which is actually happening later this month. You can do wonderful things along the Snake River out west. You can do the Mississippi. You can do New Orleans up to St. Louis, beautiful itineraries, and even some of the Canadian throughways. So there's a lot of opportunities, and there are some smaller ship companies. They're probably a little more higher price because of the amount of people. There's even some of those smaller ship cruises in the Caribbean that you can get on these smaller wind ships that go to, and to smaller islands and can get you to different places. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities for that if that's something you're interested in. We can talk about it for sure.
Yeah, and the other question I have is I saw something about as far as traveling via air right now, that some airlines are being very specific on the masks that you wear.
Right.
You've banned certain masks, and you can't wear shields.
Right. I mean, I haven't flown myself. I have no need to, and honestly, there's no desire right now to fly. It doesn't mean, I think that just like anything else, I think some of the airlines are doing it better. I don't like putting out names of suppliers and stuff out there, but I really think that Delta and Southwest are doing it the best. They're staying true to what they're doing about policy, and they're not faltering. That's another reason why I think Disney is doing the safety issue they're doing it impeccably. 99.99% of the people there are wearing masks, are being enforced. I know Southwest is not selling any middle seats. So if people are comfortable with that, that's what it is. So, a lot of this is, we have to remember that these different tour operators, airlines, cruise companies are managed by different companies. So they're mandating and enforcing that stuff differently, even though we all want to get to point A to point B, and we have 3 different airlines. So you just have to consider those things. And if there's questions, I'd like to tell people I'm here to help you if there's something specific to find that comfort level. It's all about, again, what's important to you, and to know that that's not something that you should compromise, and that there's somebody in your corner to help you with that for sure.
Hey, Carmen, we wanted to take a quick flight to Hawaii just for a few days just to get away. And then we seen that if you go to Hawaii, there's a 14-day quarantine. So we're like, forget it.
Well,
so is that still going on?
Yeah, as far as I know, Hawaii's still doing that. I follow stuff from the State Department constantly, because I had people who were fellow cruise planners associates who were booking clients to Cabo, they were booking clients to Cozumel, they were booking clients to the Dominican Republic, and they were fine. They were, within the last few weeks, and they were traveling and having great experiences. I know that I think there's some talk now, like if you go to Mexico, which has no restrictions right now. You can go to Mexico now if you want, but if you come back, the U.S. State Department is saying that you may have to quarantine when you come back. So, but how are they enforcing that? That's a question. This stuff is changing constantly. Unless there's really a need, I think it's better to just stay positive, to know something is going to be there. I'm advising people that if you're even thinking about something for next year, let's have a talk. Let's think about what options are there. I just booked somebody 2 days ago on an Alaska Disney cruise for next August, a year from now. They were willing to put the money down. It's a refundable deposit, but they're like, we want our cabin. They actually have to have somebody with a scooter, so they needed a certain type of cabin, which only has like 8 on the ship. And the one sailing only had 1 available, but they couldn't go that week, so we went to the next week. I'm like, that's the stuff you have to consider. So they're willing to put the money down because they don't want to be disappointed in 6 months when everything opens up and they say, okay, let's go. This goes back to my pictures of the puzzle. Let's start putting the puzzle a little bit together, and it doesn't mean you have to sell the farm, like I said, and just commit, but maybe you have an idea. That there's nothing wrong with that. And that goes back to the vacations that I'm talking about, because I think we all want to go. We all want to go somewhere, but we can't, So let's think about when we can, what we can. And if it changes, that's okay, because there'll be something else and I'll be there to help you out. Because I'm telling you, I've booked some people. I've had one person I've booked 3 different times because it kept getting canceled. And she's just like, we're going to go. We just keep rebooking because that's the way they are, and that's how we have to be right now because so much is out of our control.